His father kept the light burning for sailors. He kept it burning for her. Every night, without fail, the great beam would sweep across the churning sea, a golden arm pushing back the darkness. From the time I was a boy, I watched him. My father, Silas, a man carved from salt and sea spray, his hands as weathered as the old cliffs we lived on. He'd stand at the top of the tower, a silhouette against the lantern's glow, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He told me the light was a promise, a beacon of hope for those lost in the tempest. But I knew, deep down, it was more than that. It was a love letter written in light, sent out into the vast, lonely ocean. My mother, Alara, was a creature of the sea, not a mermaid from a fairy tale, but a woman with the ocean in her eyes and the rhythm of the tides in her soul. She'd come with the morning mist one day, her boat a tiny speck against the rising sun. She was a marine biologist, studying the migration of whales, and our remote little island was the perfect observation point. For a year, she lived with us, our small stone cottage usually filled with the scent of brine, and my father's pipe tobacco was suddenly alive with the smell of wildflowers she defined tucked between the rocks, and the sound of her laughter, a melody that danced with the cry of the gulls. My father, a man of few words, became a poet in her presence. He'd point out constellations to her from the Lighthouse gallery, naming them not after ancient gods, but after moments they'd shared. That star there, that was the day she first smiled at him. That cluster, the evening she taught me how to skip stones across the calm cove. The light in the tower seemed to burn brighter when she was near, as if fueled by his affection. He was no longer just a keeper of the light, he was its heart. I remember the day she had to leave. The research grant was over, and her work called her back to the mainland, to a world of cities and universities I could barely imagine. There were no dramatic goodbyes, just a quiet promise whispered on the wind. "I'll be back with the whales," she said, her hand on my father's cheek. I just nodded, his jaw tight, and watched her little boat disappear until it was swallowed by the horizon. That night, the light from the tower seemed to stretch further, searching, always searching. Years passed. I grew from a boy into a young man. I learned the ways of the lighthouse, how to clean the great lens until it sparkled like a diamond, how to trim the wick, how to fuel the lamp. My father taught me everything, his movements slow and deliberate, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. He never spoke of her, not by name, but she was everywhere. In the one book of sea creatures she left behind, its pages filled with her elegant script, in the pressed flowers that still sat on the windowsill, and most of all, in the light. Every spring when the whales would begin their migration past our island, a tension would settle over my father. He'd spend more time in the lantern room, his spyglass trained on the water for hours on end, scanning not just for ships in distress, but for a familiar boat on the horizon. The light became his vigil. He kept it burning for the sailors. Yes, but he also kept it burning for her, a constant, unwavering signal across the miles of water. "She'll see it," he'd murmur sometimes, so softly I wasn't sure if I was meant to hear. "She'll know we're still here." But she never came. The seasons turned, the whales came and went, and the sea remained empty of her boat. The hope in my father's eyes began to dim, like a lantern running low on fuel. He grew quieter, more withdrawn, the lines on his face deepening like the fissures in the cliffs. He still performed his duties with meticulous care, but the joy was gone. The light was no longer a love letter. It was an elegy, a monument to a memory. One stormy autumn, my father fell ill. The doctor from the mainland said it was his heart, weakened by years of solitude and strain. He was confined to his bed in the cottage, his breathing shallow. For the first time in my life, the full responsibility of the lighthouse fell to me. As the storm raged outside, lashing the tower with wind and rain, I climbed the winding stairs alone. The weight of it all, the lives of sailors, my father's legacy, his unending hope, it all rested on my shoulders. As I stood in the lantern room, the storm screaming around me, I looked down at our little cottage, where my father lay, and then I looked out at the raging, black ocean. I finally understood. The light wasn't just about hope, or love, or memory. It was about duty. It was about responsibility. It was about showing up every single night, no matter how you felt, no matter how tired or heartbroken you were, and pushing back the darkness. For my father, keeping that light burning was the only way he knew how to keep his own heart beating. He passed away just before dawn, as the storm began to break. The sea was calm that morning, the water a gentle gray. I buried him on the cliffside, overlooking the water, a simple stone marking his place. That night, as dusk settled, I walked to the lighthouse. The silence was deafening. There was no one to watch, no one to wait for. It was just me and the light. For a moment, I considered letting it go out. What was the point? The sailors had radar and GPS, and she was never coming back. But as I stood there, I thought of him. I thought of his unwavering dedication, his silent, powerful Lao. I thought of all the souls who had been guided by this beam of light, and I realized the light was his legacy, and now it was mine. So I lit the lamp. The great beam swept out, cutting through the twilight. It sliced across the waves, a steady, rhythmic pulse. I was no longer just the lighthouse keeper's son. I was the lighthouse keeper. I kept the light burning for the sailors. I kept it burning for him. And in a way, I kept it burning for her, too. Not with the desperate hope of my father, but as a quiet acknowledgement of a love that had once filled this lonely place with so much light. It's a promise I make every night, a promise to my past, and a beacon for anyone who might be lost in the dark, searching for a way home. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking and subscribing for more tailies from the edge of the world.